We've got barbecue back here. You're all invited. Welcome to the Sloopcast. How you doing today, Kyle?
All right, Jared. Doing all right. How are you doing?
Doing good. New tradition. Good tradition. When did I start doing this, by the way?
A year ago.
Has it been a year?
Mm-hmm. I think it's no longer new tradition.
Well, yeah, but that will be the joke. I'm just curious when it actually becomes the joke.
About a year ago.
When does it, because right now we're in the awkward phase of it not being new, but the lie isn't such a strong lie yet that it's funny, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Sup, nerd? Jared, are you sick? I have had really bad allergies this week, and my throat is a little, yeah. I was immediately put off. Isn't that how you normally feel when you join the room? To be fair. All right. Almost 100% of the time. There you go. So why are you making a thing about it? Why are you making a thing about it, Austin? All right, Kyle, what are we talking about today?
A couple of things. Well, two big topics we're going to talk about today. The first one is the transfer portal. Transfer portal cometh and the transfer portal leaveth. So we will talk about the ins and outs of the Buckeyes here. Yeah, that's our main talk here. A lot of it is commits that we've already talked about in episodes in the past, though. But I thought Jared and I thought it'd be a good idea just to kind of
wrap it up. Almost
wrap it up here.
There's a couple.
Transfer portal is finished, and this is kind of the solidified team now.
Maybe, because I think most people. But if you don't know this, I'll just explain it for anyone who might not know it. I feel like most of you do know this. Just because the portal has closed, that doesn't mean that transfer season is over. The portal closing is only for people entering the portal. So we do now feel confident that no one on the Ohio State roster is going to leave to the portal. So that part's over. However, there are a lot of players who entered the portal and have not found homes yet. There is no deadline on them finding a home. So there are a couple players out there still who I think Ohio State could still pursue or add. So we'll see how that goes.
We'll save that towards the middle of the episode. So let's start from the beginning here. You want to talk about the Buckeyes coming in or the Buckeyes leaving?
Let's talk about the Buckeyes coming in.
All right, sure. So December, the first of many portal dates here. Ohio State had a handful of players coming in. Ohio State added offensive tackle Philip Daniels from Minnesota, C.J. Donaldson, running back from West Virginia, Logan George from Idaho State, Max Clare, tight end from Purdue, and Ethan.
We're calling. You can just call him Big E, Kyle. It's fine.
Big E. All right, we'll call him Big E.
Well, I mean
that's
a shared nickname. That's not ours. Just for the record, Oni Onawa. That was. It's like a B. That's like a B. Oni Onawa. Yeah. Onwa. Your phonetic spelling doesn't have an H at the end of it. Mine does. Anyway, it's fine. Anyway, so that's kind of how you say it.
In the beginning of the year, Ty Howard, linebacker, came in just at the start of the new year, and just recently, within this last week, we got 2 new commits. We talked about Bo Atkinson from UNC as a really decent chance Ohio State getting. Ended up Ohio State did has gotten Atkinson, a pass rusher from UNC, and just yesterday or Saturday, Justin Terry, offensive tackle from West Virginia, coming over to the Buckeyes as well. So 3 offensive tackles from the portal here, Jared.
Yeah,
Definitely something that we talked about that Ohio State really needed to focus on, get some depth, get some talent onto this locker room.
for sure. There have been some recruiting class misses. That's not something we haven't talked about ad nauseum. I can't talk. My nose is gone. My throat is gone. I can't talk. But yeah, we knew that the offensive line needed help, not just in a immediate sense, but also in a depth / future tense. And to be clear, that is who Justin Terry is. He still has 3 years of eligibility left. He still has he's from Ohio, local kid coming back to Ohio State. He's not a guy who's going to push for a starting spot this year. This might be a guy who we see in a year or two. This might be a guy who they try out on the inside of the offensive line. This isn't someone who's going to, like, we talked last week about how the right tackle spot is still, could be Saraveld. It could be Phillip Daniels. They didn't bring Justin Terry in to compete in that. Not yet. Not this year. So keep that in mind. Bo Atkinson, when Ohio State goes into the portal and grabs a player at a position that is not of need, and I don't feel like they needed anyone as far as pass rushers are concerned, as far as defensive ends are concerned, like they needed some depth, but Bo Atkinson is not a depth player. DTs though, well, we'll get there. Bo Atkinson's not a depth player. This is an excellent football player. He got 7.5 sacks last year. You don't underestimate Bo Atkinson. How does he eventually work his way into the Ohio State, what is a pretty crowded Ohio State, defensive end, edge rushing room? That's yet to be seen. I'll tell you this much. He's going to play. Like, he's going to play. This guy was not brought in to be a backup. This was not a guy you added just to have some depth. Yeah, like I said, he excellent football player. That's, just keep that in mind. We talk about the 2 guys they add. One guy is a depth guy, is a future guy. Atkinson is not that. He's a star football player. Spikes said defensive tackles though. Yeah. Ohio State was very heavily involved with Murad Watson. He, however, has signed with Texas. Texas had a need for defensive tackles. Ohio State
they got him and Hirakanyu. Remember, just a few months ago too.
And that's one of the first, like, quote unquote real losses Ohio State's had to the portal. I mean, ever. Because even if you're like, what about Jamison Williams? It's like Ohio State was fine at wide receiver. Williams wanted to go be number 1 instead of number 3, which is what he would have been at Ohio State, was number 3. So we could have that conversation. Hero would have definitely been in the 2 deep in heavy rotation for Ohio State. Like, that's a real loss. And like I said, one of the first real losses for Ohio State in the portal. And, you can tell that because he went to Texas. He didn't go to Kansas State. You know what I mean? You can always tell how bad of a loss it is by where they end up. Not always, but you know what I'm saying. It's a very good indicator. So Texas gets their guy, another guy at defensive tackle, obviously a position of need for them. Ohio State is still talking to Troy Pikes, a defensive tackle from South Alabama. This isn't the guy who you're going to bring in and he's immediately going to become a starting defensive tackle for Ohio State, but he will, I imagine, he'll compete for two deep. He'll compete for rotation, which is what Ohio State needs at defensive tackle right now. Ohio State has 3 or 4 really good defensive tackles, Ohio State starting level defensive tackles. But 3 or 4 is not enough. Especially since that or is really painful, because you can't just have 3 defensive tackles, because the way you rotate your defensive tackles, should anyone get hurt. Also keep in mind that like the nose tackle and the 3 tech are different positions. A lot of people will just say defensive tackle, defensive tackle, defensive tackle. And some guys can play both. Like Tyleek could play both. He was better at 3 tech, but Tyleek could play both. But some guys can't. Some guys are very much, I'll say Edric Houston, who we all project to be the starting 3 tech defensive tackle for Ohio State this year. Edric Houston's a 3 tech. Edric Houston's not a nose tackle. As an example, I'd be more comfortable moving Edric Houston out to defensive end than I would be moving him to nose tackle. That's the type of player he is. So you have to keep that stuff in mind. Not all defensive tackles are made the same. And Ohio State has, I would say, 2 very good let's just say they have 3 really good defensive tackles for right now. And a couple guys who could be the 4th guy. But if you have the opportunity to go get a guy like Troy Pikes, then you go get a guy like Troy Pikes. Obviously, Murad Watson was a priority player, but Texas apparently just brought a dump truck and Ohio State just wasn't willing to do that for that player. And why does Ohio State It's like, the money, as much as we like to think the money is unlimited, it is not. The money you give to him is money that you don't give to someone else. Mm-hmm. Or it's a favor that you call in now that you won't be able to call in next year. You know, sometimes when a guy, like Caleb Downs hits the portal, you got to call in a favor. But you can't call in that favor 3 times a year. So sometimes you gotta pick your battles, and Ohio State definitely would love to add Troy Pikes. We'll see how that goes. There might be some other defensive tackle targets out there. Ohio State has not reached out to any of them that I know of. I could be mistaken. I could have old information on that, but as far as I know right now, Troy Pikes is the primary target at defensive tackle for Ohio State in the portal. And as Kyle pointed out, they just added Justin Terry from West Virginia, Ohio kid, future player. He's a depth player. He's a future player. They are also still in conversation with Orrin Irving, an offensive lineman from Sam Houston State. I am not sure. I'll just say it. I'm not sure how the addition of Justin Terry affects either Ohio State's perspective or in Irving's perspective on the mutual relationship that is or isn't there anymore after Justin Terry signs. I think Ohio State would love to add more offensive line talent personally, but again, guys out of the portal cost money. And if someone out there really, really needs an offensive tackle and they can say, hey, Justin Terry, here's a starting spot and $1 million, Ohio State won't be able to match that. So we'll see how it goes. My guess is that they'll stick with Justin Terry and not add Irving, but that's a total guess on my part. I don't actually know.
Great, awesome. I think this is a good time for a quick ad break here. Can quickly talk about all of the Buckeye players who transferred out, and then talk about the draft. Then we'll talk about the draft here. So the sloopcast.com is your go-to link for everything and anything Sloopcast related. Again, thesloopcast.com, where you can find our Patreon page, Discord, YouTube, our merchandise, Spotify, all of those and much, much more. Again, over at thesloopcast.com. We'll take a quick ad break and be right back.
And here we are. We are back. Buckeyes leaving Ohio State. You know, we talked a lot about the guys who left back in December and January. So again, the way the transfer portal works, there's a period from, what is it? I don't remember, but I think it's December 15th to January 15th where you can enter the portal. But because Ohio State was playing football very late into the season, there was, for specifically Ohio State, 10 days after your final game, the portal will remain open, is how that works. So 10 days after the final game, the portal remained open and Ohio State lost a few players. Kyle, who did they lose in the initial run of players?
Yeah, so in December/early January, Jaden Ballard went to Wisconsin. Gabe Powers, which I think was a fan favorite for this year, was hoping to see him stay in the scarlet and gray, but
it's hard when you're only playing two linebackers.
True. He's gone to Kansas State. Aaron Noland, is now at South Carolina. Miles Walker and Zen Mikowski, both offensive tackles. Miles going to Boise State and Zen going to Indiana. And Jaden Bonsu is heading over to Pitt.
Yeah, and that was your initial run of players. After,
and then Koja Antui, a couple weeks later, left to go to Colorado State.
Then after the national championship game, Mitchell Melton hits the portal, eventually ends up in Virginia. Devin Brown ends up at Cal. I think Devin Brown entered the portal a while ago, but he just wasn't visiting because he was very locked in on the national championship run. He wasn't visiting. Devin Brown ends up at Cal. George Fitzpatrick, offensive tackle, also goes to Kansas State with Gabe Powers. Calvin Simpson Hunt, a guy who you didn't really want to lose, but they have enough depth in the cornerback room that it's fine and it's understandable. I think he could have been fighting for rotation this year, but probably best for everyone that he move on. Although, like I said, Ohio State would have absolutely kept him if they could have. And then Hero Kanu, who, again, I would say is one of Ohio State's real, their first big portal loss. A guy who is absolutely going to contribute, a guy who we see Ohio State trying to find a defensive tackle in the portal right now. Like, if you need any proof that, as much as you wanted to keep Jamison Williams, or to use an example from this year, Calvin Simpson Hunt, as much as you wanted to keep those guys, you don't see Ohio State immediately going to the portal and trying to replace them the way you're seeing Ohio State trying to go to the portal to get a defensive tackle to replace Kanu. This is a real loss. But he ends up at Texas. And like I said, that was a big priority for Texas this offseason, was defensive tackle, and they're doing their best to address it. Now, As far as scholarship players, though, that's it. Ohio State lost zero scholarship players in the second portal opening.
Yeah, so Hero was the last one, and he committed January 29th. That was it.
Yes.
And you have a quote. You have a quote that Ryan Day mentioned here, which I thought was kind of funny to read this. He said, "I woke up a little bit of a headache because it was a long night last night." And this was related to the portal closing. He said, "That first beer went down cold after the portal finally closed at midnight. I can tell you that."
Here's to you, Ryan Day.
It makes you really think what players had him up long that he thought that might have transferred out. Makes you wonder.
I would say if you've been doing it as long as Ryan Day has been doing it at this point, I still feel like, I don't know if people realize how long he's been the coach at Ohio State now, but like if you've been doing it as long as Ryan Day's been doing it, I think it really honestly could be just like anxious about not knowing, if that makes sense. Like anxious about a surprise. I mean, because you ask a valid question. If he was up until midnight waiting on that, did he have a specific player or players in mind, or was it just sort of a general anxiety of, a player hitting the portal that comes as a surprise to him? Because I'm sure that has happened. I'm sure at some point someone has, probably Mark Pantoni, rings up Ryan Day and said, "Hey, so-and-so just hit the portal. So-and-so just filed their paperwork."
Yeah.
And it was a shock to them, or at least a surprise. That being said, yeah, there may have been specific players in mind. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the biggest takeaway here, and in the thumbnail, and the name on the thumbnail, the name of this episode is Ohio State wins the transfer portal. And it's not because of Bo Atkinson, and it's not because of Justin Terry, although I'm incredibly happy to have both of those players. It's not because of all the great players they picked up in December, although I'm incredibly happy to have 2 offensive tackles added to the roster, starting level offensive tackles to the roster. I'm incredibly happy to have Max Clare on the roster, as well as CJ Donaldson and Logan George. And, these are all great additions. The reason I say Ohio State wins the transfer portal is because they lost 0 scholarship players after the spring game. 0 scholarship players lost after the spring game. That's why you win the portal.
Who was it here? I'm trying to find the quote here.
TC Caffey does go to the portal. Not a scholarship running back, but TC Caffey, I think there is an alternate history where he doesn't get hurt last year, and that changes things for him. Maybe there's an alternative history where Sam William Dixon, who did enter the portal back in January, end of December, I don't remember, during the first window, and then ultimately withdrew and returned to Ohio State. What if those things don't happen? Could TC Caffey stay at Ohio State? Maybe. But Ohio State is, with their current running back room, fine. And again, he wasn't a scholarship player. They lose a punter and a kicker. and a long snapper and a wide receiver. And the wide receiver is a guy who you would have liked to have kept, but hey, the wide receiver room is so stacked that you get it. Sam William Dixon looked nice too. I think Sam William Dixon revolving door was the final straw for TC. I don't know.
Or to go back,
they also added CJ Donaldson. Like, you know what I mean?
To go back about players not leaving during the second main transfer period here. And that says a lot about Coach Day and the culture that Ohio State has there. You talk about Brock Boyd, who is a wide receiver we talked about in last week's episode, changing his verbal commitment from TCU to Ohio State.
Sure.
And he just talks about the culture and how great Ohio State is, and all the coaches and coaching staff that makes up that culture too.
There was a player, a 2026 recruit, who, after I read his interview that he gave to one of the media outlets, I think it was on 3, and he just gushed about the culture and the yada and the this and the that, all the stuff you just said. And it was, he like, full quotes, just kept on going about all of the, again, all the stuff you just said. And I was just like, okay, I'm putting him in the mock. It's like, okay, he's going in the mock now, because he just seemed totally overwhelmed by it. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not even going to say who that was. But again, I do think that there's a lot to be said about the culture. You're talking about the spring game after a national championship game. And the last time we saw Ohio State win a national championship game, 2014, we saw the 2015 team, let's be honest, kind of just take a lackadaisical, that's the word I was looking for, lackadaisical victory lap of a year. They were kind of half in, half out in 2015. Coaching,
you had so many players.
Also,
you had so many players. You had so many players that came back, or
right,
that stayed. That was,
it was a super sophomore type team. And to your point, I think is also a huge factor in that. But I look at this team and I don't see right now, I don't see a team who is just happy that they won it last year. I don't see a team who's like, okay, we won, now I can go get mine and start transferring out, with the exception of one player. And I don't even say that was Hero's motivation. I don't know Hero's motivation. I'm not trying to, I had nothing but the best for Hero. Nothing but the best. I have no reason to believe there's any ill will there whatsoever. But I'm just saying, it would almost kind of make sense for a bunch of players to be like, I got my national championship game, let's go get a paycheck. And I know at least one player, and I'm sure it's more, but I know for a fact at least one player passed up on a shit ton of money to stay at Ohio State. And I know some other players still, and I know some other players who still, at least, maybe it wasn't I don't know how you quantify a shit ton, but there are some other players who took less money to stay at Ohio State as well. And again, that's the year after the national championship game. It would be very easy to be like, all right, won it all, let's get paid now. It'd be very easy to do. Listen, I'll say at least that I'll say that two of those players were wide receivers. The two of those players will be starting at wide receiver. And the two of those players are outside wide receivers. Did I narrow it down enough yet?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. All right. We'll go ahead and take our second ad break here. I think it's a good time here. Take our second ad. Again, thesloopcast.com, where you can find everything and anything Sloopcast related. Some other links here you might be interested in. If you're not into podcast merchandise, check out the 7071 store. Just some cool little designs that Jared has made. That's non-podcast related. The Sloopcast gifts, I actually really enjoy. Jared does spend a good amount of time on a lot of the gifts out there. You check that out. That's actually some really cool gifts that you can share or use when you're messaging out or using it in our Discord, discord.thesloopcast.com. Lot of great things in there. So again, thesloopcast.com is that website. So we'll take that ad break and be right back.
I also say this, as far as the GIFs that I make, and that is GIF, no T. As far as the GIFs that I make, they're all hosted on Tenor, which most of the time is the keyboard is the GIF that's integrated into your keyboard on your phone. So if you just go to the GIFs on your phone and search Sloopcast on them, you'll find a bunch of those GIFs. Just saying. All right. All right, Kyle, we talked about the transfer portal. I think we got that covered. The other big event of the weekend, Kyle posting one of those GIFs in the chat now. I actually do really like this one. I don't normally do them vertically. I also don't normally do like the quick replay thing. Anyway, doesn't matter. But the other big event of this weekend, NFL draft. Ohio State has, what was the final number, Kyle?
14.
14.
One shy of tying the record.
And McLaughlin should have been picked. I'm honestly very surprised he wasn't. At some point, I just sort of started assuming either the Steelers or the Cardinals were going to take him. Because that was just the vibe at a certain point.
Mm-hmm. So 4 Buckeyes in the first round. Emeka going to the Buccaneers. Donovan Jackson to the Vikings. Tyleik Williams to the Lions. And Josh Simmons with the last pick in the first round, heading over to the Chiefs.
Yeah. Ohio State continues their streak of getting a wide receiver drafted in the first round.
4 years in a row, and that makes number 5.
Emeka is number 5? Or 5
Emeka
players,
is
4
number
years
5 in 4 years.
Yeah, because Wilson and Olave were both picked in the first round. Yeah.
Yep.
Likelihood, Kyle? Likelihood that they continue that streak next year? We know that streak will be if they make it next year, we know it'll go another year.
Yes.
Unless something horrible happens. So the question being, Carnell Tate or Brandon Innes, can they go first round next year?
I hate to say this as of today. Again, season.
By the way, neither of them have to come out.
Can change everything. Season can change everything for better or worse. Like we've seen. I think there's a specific Buckeye player I know that people in our Discord chat has talked about. Dipped a lot in the draft. Depending on the season, yeah, maybe so, maybe not. But sitting here today, I would say no. I think the streak would stop.
I think Carnell Tate has the talent to do it. Yeah. Will Ohio State send him the volume? that is needed, and maybe it's not needed. NFL scouts aren't totally wowed by stats, but it helps. Getting that attention helps.
Yes.
So the question becomes, how do the balls get distributed? I think this will be a little more of a run team this year. You have a true freshman quarterback. That's a hindrance, at least in the beginning of the season. You also have Max Clare added to the roster. He's going to take up some receptions. Emeka leaves. That'll free up some receptions.
Mm-hmm.
But the elephant is still in the room. As far as pass distribution is concerned, elephant's still in the room. You know, if you talk about pass distribution, Jeremiah Smith is going to get the most targets. So the question becomes, how do the other targets get distributed out? Max Clare, Brandon Ennis, Carnell Tate. Those are probably your next three guys, but in what order and in what quantity is yet to be seen. Ohio State in the past has thrown a lot of volume to the slot. Maybe Ennis becomes that first round player. We've seen a lot of promise out of him. There's just been a lot of guys in front of him, especially since he's a slot guy and Emeka was there. You can say like, oh, there was a bunch of guys in front of Jeremiah Smith too. Okay, there was, but he didn't have to de-seat fifth year Emeka Ibuka. It's a different thing. So I don't know what to say other than to say we'll see, and it will depend a lot on the pass distribution. Kyle, who do you think has the best fit? Like, who do you look at all these picks? And I'm sorry, I think you only went through the first rounders, and then I just started doing a Jared thing.
Yeah, you're good. Judkins and Henderson almost back-to-back picks. It seemed almost poetic that they did. Yeah. Judkins to the Browns, Henderson to the Patriots, JT to the Colts. No Buckeyes in the third round. We had 3 in the fourth. It's Cody Simon to Arizona, Ransom to the Panthers, and Jack Sawyer to the Steelers. And then in the fifth round, we had Hamilton to the Rams, Hancock to the Bills, Denzel Burke to the Cardinals, and then Will Howard in the sixth round, heading on over to the Steel City.
Yep.
So you were asking best fit. Man, there's a number of ways you can take this. I mean, I think Emeka can contribute really well with the Buccaneers and how the Buccaneers offense is. I think he can contribute right away.
He can very easily be
Simmons,
the third wide receiver in that offense.
Yeah.
And
Josh Simmons may start. He may really push to be a starter for the Chiefs. The Chiefs had some offensive line issues. Josh Simmons may go in and maybe start right tackle. Who knows? I think Henderson would be a great fit for the Patriots. The way that Henderson plays his game and the way that Vrabel runs his offense there, and Henderson being a NFL caliber pass blocker, he's going to be in a lot of plays. So I think Henderson is a great fit for the Patriots there. Sawyer just seems fitting to be a Steeler.
It does feel right. It does kind of feel right. I don't know how to explain it beyond that. I think the big question there is that I'm sure Pittsburgh sees him as a linebacker. In their system, Jack Sawyer's a linebacker.
Sure.
Making that transition is tough.
Yeah.
So
Will
you're
Ha-
not going to
Will
see
Howard-
him. I don't think you're going to see him play right away. And if he makes the transition, great, but it's a difficult
yeah.
transition to make.
Yeah. Will Howard, I don't expect a lot from Will Howard in the NFL, but I think the Steelers organization is a great place to be at.
I mean, they need a quarterback. I mean, a lot of places had the Steelers taking Sanders in round 1 with the 21st pick. Turns out no one took Sanders in the first round or the second round or
The second or the third
round. That's one of the worst draft falls I've ever seen, but we don't got to talk about that. A lot of people, everyone's talking about that. We don't need to add our voices to it. But
so Seth and McLaughlin, which we thought was going to be drafted, and honestly, like he could be borderline first round if he wasn't injured.
Oh, okay. If he had, I saw him as like a third round guy. And quite frankly, I don't think his injury should have, unless there is something medically that I am unaware of, that the general public is unaware of. I don't understand what happened. If he hadn't gotten hurt, second, maybe third round.
From what I saw, like he was the number 1 center in this draft.
I mean, you won the Remington. Now, just because you had the best year in college football doesn't mean you'll be the best pro.
Sure. So he goes to the Bengals, and Josh Fryer goes to the Cardinals, which that will make 3 Buckeyes going to Arizona, and then G. Scott heading over to the Patriots. So that is all Buckeyes that have essentially put their name into the hat for the NFL.
Yeah.
Have found a spot in the NFL.
Yeah. And every single player who was eligible to leave the defense was drafted.
Yeah. That is nuts. There was a lot of different stats out there.
That's not true. That's not true. God, I can't with names right now. Iggy could have left.
Oh, yeah.
That's my bad. Iggy could
Either
have
way,
left.
Yeah, a lot of different stats out there. Just crazy stats. Like all 4 defensive linemen were picked, and that's like the first time in a very, very long time that's happened for Ohio State. Yeah, it's
not. You want to talk about first times, and it's not the first time, but it is the first time in a very long time. Ohio State, 2 players drafted in the first. 2 offensive linemen drafted in the first round.
Yeah.
Especially considering the conversations you and I were having a year ago about
this team will only do as well as how well the offensive line does, and 2 in the first round.
2 in the first round and a national title.
That's great.
I think, again, I do think Will Howard's a good fit in Pittsburgh. I don't think we're going to see him play early. But he does feel like he is originally from Pennsylvania. So that's obviously nice for him and his family. Denzel Burke falling to the 5th is a crime, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah. He's the one I kind of hinted earlier about Buckeye players doing, gaining their stock or losing their stock. But he was the one that I was kind of hinting towards.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think someone who's going to potentially could be a big surprise. I think Ransom to the Panthers. fourth round pick there. I think that's a position I believe the Panthers needed some help in. He could be a surprise that he could have a really
Sure.
good
Absolutely.
NFL career.
Absolutely, he could. All right, Kyle, any other thoughts on the draft?
No, I think that's it. I think that I was really happy to see former Buckeye players getting drafted, getting their chance to do what they strive to do, and that's get drafted in the NFL, play in the NFL. So I don't care what team they get drafted. I'm just really happy to see them succeed.
Yeah. Do you have anything in Kyle's corner?
Anything in Kyle's corner? That is something I don't think I honestly really looked at. Just looking real quick here, I saw that just because we take a shot anytime we can at the team up north, but the women's tennis beat that team up north in the Big Ten tournament championship.
Nice. Very nice.
We'll say that.
All right. Anything else in Kyle's corner? No is an acceptable answer. Oh, okay.
Speaking of the NFL draft, not one, not two, but three former Buckeye players were drafted in the NFL.
Well, a lot more than that. Do you mean former quarterbacks?
Yes. in this year's draft.
Yes. 3 former Ohio State quarterbacks drafted in this draft. Where did yours end up getting picked?
7th round to the Dolphins in the 231st overall.
Considering where his hype was coming out of high school. And by the way, and I understand that there are flaws there. I get it. I'm not saying he should have been picked. And I understand he didn't live up to the potential that other people placed on him. I get it. Man, there were a lot of quarterbacks picked before him that I would still, even if there's a little bit of that potential that's still untapped in Quinn Ewers, because there's a lot of untapped potential, and maybe it's lost, maybe it's gone. But like, I'd rather have Quinn Ewers than Sanders or Mertz, who were drafted ahead of him.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of quarterbacks drafted ahead of Ewers that I would have taken. I would have taken Ewers for.
Kyle McCord was picked ahead of Ewers.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on Kyle McCord, but let's not go there right now.
And he was also picked ahead of Howard, just by a couple of picks. But
listen, do I really want to go there with McCord right now?
No.
Where did he go, by the way?
He 181st pick and went to the Eagles.
Oh, good God. He needed a forgiving fan base, and that is not a forgiving fan base. That, if you wanted to know what I wanted to say about McCord and then decided not to say, just read into that statement. Just read into that statement. That is not a forgiving fan base. He did at least go to high school in Philadelphia, though. So return home for him.
Yeah, Ewers was the 14th of 14 quarterbacks drafted.
That fall is crazy. I know everyone talks about the Sanders fall, and based off of what we thought was going to happen, earlier this month, sure, the Sanders fall is a bigger fall, but based off of what we thought would happen 4 or 5 years ago, that's a crazy fall for Ewers. Absolutely crazy.
Yep.
All right. That's the end of the episode.
That's the end of the episode.
All right. Tonight's ending music will be brought to you by Heart Attack Man. It's a Columbus. No, excuse me. They're not Columbus. Akron, Cleveland, I forget. Ohio.
Heart Attack.
Heart Attack Man. They are from Ohio. We'll maybe we can just
Cleveland.
leave it at that. Cleveland is it Cleveland? Okay, they're from Cleveland. They have a new album out, a new release out. This is from that. This is called Laughing Without Smiling. Once again, name of the band is Heart Attack Man. Name of the song is Laughing Without Smiling. So with all that being said, I'd like to encourage everyone to drink local beer, listen to local music, and of course, support your local podcasters. Once again, this is Heart Attack Man.